Yeah, today we're talking about 2016's Paterson. It was directed by Jim Jarmusch. He did films like The Dead Don't Die, came out in 2019, I believe. I have not seen it. This is the only Jim Jarmusch film that I have seen, actually. But he did The Only Lovers Left Alive. That was the top one on IMDb. Can't say that I've heard of it. I have heard of Coffee and Cigarettes, Stranger Than Paradise, and he has many films. He is a seasoned veteran. And from what I've got from like interviews and just like the type of movies that he makes, he's very much in it for what he gets out of it, which is very much reflected in this movie. He makes movies for the love of the craft. I remember there was an interview I watched and it was like, he said that he's likes, I don't know if he said he likes smaller budget, but it seems like the type of movies that he's making, he makes for himself. He doesn't like the marketing aspect or other people putting influence in the movies who are thinking about the marketing aspect. He just wants it. It's the movie's his baby, and he raises it how he chooses. I don't know if that's a weird metaphor, but yes, he also composed music for a lot of his films. Honestly, not sure if he did for Paterson. Didn't look too much into that, but he's a music guy as well. Friends with Tom Waits. A lot of his previous projects had like musicians in it. So yeah, seems like a cool guy. I did want to watch The Dead Don't Die. Like, I feel like I heard of Paterson, didn't know it was him, but then when I learned about The Dead Don't Die in 2019, a zombie film, it's like very deadpan zombie movie. I was like, I looked into him a little more, and I remember a lot of people being like, oh, Dead Don't Die is so boring, nothing happens in it, and like a lot of people have the same complaints with this film, but if it's anything like this film with the added zombie genre, I think that could be a lot of fun. But I know it's not going to be exactly like this because the messages probably are not the same. But here we are. So Paterson. Oh, how do I put this in a nice concise log line? I feel like it's one of the easiest ones to make a log line because Paterson follows a week in the life of Adam Driver's character. His name is Paterson. He lives in Paterson, New Jersey, and he goes about his week as a bus driver and a poet. And that's the whole movie. The overwhelming comment that I got before watching this movie when I brought it up to other people was, nothing happens in this movie, and it's great. And I mirror that sentiment. Nothing happens in this movie, and it's great. It's very slow. It's clearly poetic. It's about him making poems. And it's just everything I've read about it and watched videos about it. It's about, they all say, I feel like they all mirror the same line. They're like, oh, it's about the small moments in life and just noticing the poeticness in life. And it makes it seem very, I don't know, just, it's less palatable when you read those words, but more palatable when you watch the movie. I have a friend whose dream job is to be a bus driver. Yeah, and I think that this movie displays that very well. Because in this movie, there's so many sequences where he's just driving along. He's listening to people in the back, the conversations that they're having. He's looking along the street at the people passing by. And then he uses that to inspire his poetry when he's on his break or when he comes home or like before he starts the job. And yeah, he never has any, like, there's no conflict with him being like, oh, my job's so boring. There's no outburst from him being like, oh, I hate my life. It's so restricting. I do the same thing every day. He takes everything as it is. And yeah, it's like, yeah, the simplicity in it. So yeah, also, yeah, the film was, it seems like it was technically adapted from a poem by, what's his name? They say it so many times in the film. Oh, I have it here. William Carlos Williams. They bring him up so many times. It's pretty funny. Called Paterson, which is a 5 or 6 volume book of poems that he made while just browsing around Paterson, which is kind of what this film is as well. And you can see a lot of similarities because the poem isn't about a person in Paterson. It's just about the place Paterson itself. And they're kind of personifying the location in the poem and then personifying the poem in Adam Driver. So, yeah, the poem wasn't about a person, it was about the place. And yeah, you can see a lot of similarities. There's this one website, it's called PatersonProject.com, and it has here, actually I have it right here, I can bring it up. I have the power to do that. So, on PatersonProject.com, it has here, it says at the top, it's impossible to provide more than a synopsis behind the whole work of Paterson, because apparently it is like a bunch of volumes of it. But here is an excerpt from book 1, and hopefully an understanding of heart underlying our musical and visual response. So I think this Paterson Project website is like they're adding like visuals and music to it, but this is just a part of the poem, and this is the reference I'm using for that. So it's talking about the falls, which Adam Driver spends a lot of time with. What was another part? There's another part that I was like very much mirroring the movie. Well, I mean, like the waterfall definitely mirrors. There's a part with a young girl who makes a poem about water falling. I'll get to that in a bit. That was a great part. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the movie, he's just noticing things, and that's what this poem is doing right now. Now I'm just reading this poem and trying to see if I can get anything out of it. I remember there was a certain part. Maybe I read more of it on a different website that I'm not remembering here. But alas, based on a poem translated into a movie. So a few technical things before we get into the thick of it. It was made on a $5 million budget, $5 million budget, and I feel like, yeah, that's in a Hollywood scale. That's not very much. For what's happening in this movie, I think that's a good amount because it allowed them access to everything they needed. Like, there's no big sets. It's a lot of it. It's in a house. It's at the falls. But hey, they get access to things like the bus. I mean, the cinematography was great. Maybe he's paying for actors. I mean, you see the budget number, but you never know what they actually spend it on. Maybe it's like just spending it on getting Adam Driver, who is fresh off Star Wars. It could be that. But $5 million budget, hey, that's a nice amount for this movie. Could have been made on less. And hey, they made it work with that. And the worldwide gross was $10 million. $10.7 million. So it's nice to see that a movie like this made money. It's great to see. Maybe it has to do with Jim Jarmusch's prestige. Maybe it has to do with Adam Driver. Or maybe people just really love the film. And I mean, most people who look into it seem to really like it. And a lot of people who kind of just threw it on and be like, oh, Adam Driver, it's a drama, probably didn't like it as much. But alas. If we're talking about some of the characters, Adam Driver, who plays Paterson, I don't know. I've really loved Adam Driver in a lot of recent things. He was great in Marriage Story. I feel like this is another marriage story, but where there's no fighting. That could be the title here too. But Adam Driver in this movie, he's like a quirky guy, but you can't really put your finger on it. He's like, the way he plays everything so nonchalantly in this movie is so refreshing, and it's like he feels so genuine even when like the dog rips up his poem book and he's not mad about anything. Like, there's the genuineness to it, but also alludes to maybe there's more to it, because like after the dog rips up his poem book, I guess that's kind of the climax of the movie. Dog rips up his poem book. And then you expect him maybe to go on an outburst or something like that. But he's like, no, everything's fine. The only subtle hint of conflict was like when he's sitting down and he's just, yeah, maybe you're like, oh, he's internalizing everything. He's gonna do something drastic. But then he just goes on a walk. And that's very much the story of this movie. They set things up where audience thinks traditionally there's going to be conflict. Like they set up early in the movie. There's these guys in a convertible, and they come up to him and they're like, yo, you better watch out for dog nappers. And he's like, okay, thanks for the heads up. And then nobody dog naps him. Nothing happens. Maybe it's showing that in real life, those conflicts don't always arise, because in movies you have to have conflict Or at least, I guess this movie kind of breaks that, but movies are all about conflict. And this one's like, in real life, sometimes that doesn't actually happen. But yeah, Paterson, Adam Driver, he was great. Okay. I do not know how to say her name. Golshifteh Farahani, who played Laura. Are they married? I couldn't tell if they were married. Yeah, they are married. It says in the synopsis here. Lives with his wife, Laura. And she was great as well. She is his foil. She is the creative outlet, external. She's the external creative. He's the internal creative. She tries to do literally every artistic medium. She stays at home, doesn't even have a job. She paints. She does wardrobe. She tries to pick up guitar. She does cooking, experimental meals, Brussels sprouts and cheese. She made the Brussels sprouts and cheese, and Adam Driver was like, "Oh, wow, that's great, honey. Thanks for making this." But like Brussels sprouts and cheese kind of sounds good. Brussels sprouts and cheese pie. I think that would be good. I respect it. But yeah, she was a good foil. I think at the beginning it kind of played a trick on me because he is the one who's working and she is not working. She's staying at home dreaming of becoming a country singer and everything. And like it seemed like she was taking advantage of him. Like it's a relationship that he's not going to leave and that she's taking advantage of him making money to use for her artistic outlet. But then as it went on, I think it's another thing where it's like it set that up in my mind and I expected there to be a conflict, but there wasn't a conflict. And maybe that's a subtle thing that maybe was going on, but in the end it really seemed like they were fine. Like he really seemed like he was fine with what was happening. It's like at the end of the day, they can afford their house, it seems like. They can afford their rent and their taxes. So hey, why not let her be artistic? That's what it felt like in the end. But at the beginning, it kind of set up where it was like you might think there might be a conflict in their relationship, but there never really was. There never really was, which is wild. But yeah, she was a fun foil. She I don't know. They were both great. The next actor is the dog. The dog named Marvin in real life, who played Nellie. No. Other way around. The dog in real life is named Nellie, and he played Marvin. Here, let me grab a picture of Nellie the dog. And tragically, very sadly, oh shoot, how do I adjust this? I want to get a picture of him. Open link in new window. Perfect. There we go. Oh, come on. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Weird take. That bark in the trailer didn't sound like that kind of dog. Huh. I honestly don't remember the bark in the trailer. But yeah, I don't know enough about dogs. But a sad fact. Unfortunately, Nellie has passed away. But at the Cannes Film Festival, which this movie was playing at, Nellie won the Palme d'Or posthumously for the best dog performance in a film that year. So very sad to see that before the award show, Nellie did pass away. But apparently Nellie was a rescue dog, an English bulldog. And hey, Nellie in the movie, pretty much the third character. And it's kind of like, there's always like that stereotypical token dog character where it's like, oh, the dog is cute, guys, go to the, pan to the dog. But the scene where, there's a scene, or okay, let me explain it this way. Throughout the film, Adam Driver walks home after his shift as a bus driver, and he always notices that his mailbox is crooked. And then he straightens it before walking into the house. And it was like Wednesday or Thursday in the film. So we're going throughout the days of the week. And then it showed the dog, while he was at work, creak open the front door, go outside, push the mailbox, and then run back inside. And the door just like closed. It's like the dog magically knew how to open the door and do this every single day. And I laughed out loud watching it by myself when that happened. So, yeah, we love Nellie and rest in peace, sadly. But yeah, great character. I don't know if it's like in the end of the movie, Paterson says like he hates the dog. It seemed like every time Adam Driver and or Paterson and Laura kissed, the dog like started barking and kind of like broke it up, and then Laura like goes to see the dog, be like, "Hey doggy, how are you doing?" And then in the end he's like, "Oh, I hate you." He hates the dog. And it's like, at first I was thinking, is the dog like representing him? Because, okay, here's my theory. It's a movie about him going through his life, looking at things, and that's all dogs do. They just chill in people's houses and they just watch them. That's what they do all day. And they go for walks, and they just live their life. And I'm kind of just developing this theory now that if the dog represents him, then that means he's watching his life unravel. And maybe he is unsatisfied with it, and he can't do anything about it, but he's just stuck as a prisoner, watching his life go by. Or, alternatively, more along the themes of the movie, he's fine with that. He's happy to watch his marriage. I don't know. I'm just speaking out of my arse. Okay. Next character. Okay, all the other characters are pretty minor at this point. We got Donnie, the bus driver. Or I guess he's a bus driver as well. He was in the trailer. The guy who's never okay. I wrote down in my notes. The guy who's like, "Oh, how's it going, Paterson?" He's like, "Good, how are you?" He's like, "Oh, not really that great. Got to get money for my cousin's wedding. Got a rash on my back." There's not much more to his character. He was just one of the... That seems like the type of character that's going to like show up in every Jim Jarmusch film. They're just the deadpan comedy. It's like... What I'm thinking right now is that the movie, a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's just like nothing happens. It's real life." But like a lot of these characters wouldn't happen in real life. Like this deadpan kind of character isn't going to be in real life, but it weirdly works for some reason. And I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. But yeah, he was funny. Then we got Doc, the bartender, who puts on chess tournaments, and his wife gets mad at him because he used money for something. And so Adam Driver every night goes to get a beer at the bar with this guy, and he's just kind of chilling there, debating what Paterson memorabilia or newspaper articles about famous Paterson residents. What was it? Iggy Pop put an article about Iggy Pop on the mantle. Yeah, he was fun too. He was like they have a good time at the bar. And then also at the bar you have Everett and Marie, the lovers quarrel, which is the most conflict in the entire film. Because honestly, I guess that was the one moment where it was like something actually could happen, because Everett comes into the bar after heartbroken by Marie, and he has a gun. And he's like gonna shoot her, and then he's gonna shoot himself, but Paterson disarms him professionally. But it turns out it was a toy gun. And I think, yeah, they were both fun. They weren't huge parts. I think Everett is like, whereas Paterson is somebody who internalizes everything. You have Everett who literally wears everything on his sleeve, doesn't care who knows that he's heartbroken. And I think that Doc at one point, he compared them to Romeo and Juliet, but then he also compared them to Abbott and Costello, a comedy duo. So it's... I was going to say like, so it means this, but I don't know what that means. It's just funny. And the last characters I wanted to mention, it was in the trailer as well. The two kids on the bus who said that they were anarchists. Kara Hayward and Jared Gilman, the duo from Moonrise Kingdom, Wes Anderson's film. Literally the two main characters in Wes Anderson's film a little older in this movie, just on the bus for a scene. And that's just like a film nerd reference for everybody right there. And I don't know what it means, but it was great. Great to see that cameo. Okay. So, what I wanted to say mainly about this film is like, I think the thesis, what I got from it was like, the origin of art can come from anything, can come from the mundane. And as all of the reviewers and people who make videos on it, they're like, oh, the beautiful, or the beauty in the mundane and the everyday life. And it's true. It is true. I think that for me, I forget what movie we talked about previously. I was saying that it seemed like a previous movie we talked about was you have different moments in your life and you don't know why they're important, but if you like collage them together, they like make something. And that kind of feels like this as well. And I feel like that's another thing that this movie, the movie's message kind of said as well, because I really, really did like, there was two poems that stuck out for me that Paterson makes. I'll get to them in just, I just want to mention that the reason that the mundane life worked and didn't get boring because it was so detailed. It's like, it's not just him writing poetry and you don't get to see it. You get to see what he's thinking. And it's a way, it's kind of like a better version of just voiceovers of what the person's thinking, because you see what they're writing down and what they're thinking in that moment, and you kind of try to interpret that. And then you have things, because you're seeing 7 days, there's like small differences. I remember there was one, it's like in the morning every day, he kisses her when he leaves his bed to go to work, but one day he didn't. And so when he was making his breakfast, she came up to the kitchen and he was like, oh, are you awake now? And she's like, no. And she gave him a kiss and then went back to bed. And like, nothing's made of that. It wasn't a conflict or anything. It's just like the little details were cool. What was I saying? Okay, yeah, I sidetracked. The two poems, the Waterfalls poem by the little girl, and as well the Would You Rather Be a Fish poem at the end. Because I think the Would You Rather Be a Fish poem at the end, it's mainly talking about, he says in the poem, this is a very crude interpretation, or just a crude retelling of the poem. Would you rather be a fish was a line from a song, but in the same song they also said, would you rather be a pig or a cow? But I only remember, would you rather be a fish, as if nothing else in the song existed. Very crude retelling of it. The way he said it was very nice and poetic. But I think that at the end, it was like at the very end of the film, it speaks to how Paterson throughout his day is looking for inspiration for his poems. And all it's about is taking the little bits that you find inspiring, you may not know why, and then trying to make something of it. Because that poem originated because, presumably the guy who wrote the movie, heard that song. I think it was like, oh, my grandpa used to play this song. He heard that song and he actually just remembered that one little bit. And then he managed to make that poem out of it. I don't know. It's another one of the, I think, okay, I'm literally talking about getting inspiration from somewhere for not knowing why. And that's here as well. You don't have to explain it. It's just, yeah. What am I talking about? What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So the poems that were actually written by Paterson in this movie originated from Ron Paget, who Jim Jarmusch got. He's a 74-year-old poet, and he wrote many of the poems in the movie. And there was an interview with him. I think it was a PBS interview. It said he hopes to inspire people that poetry can come from anywhere. That is not a direct quote, but still, alas. Yeah. And I think this movie did a very good job at telling that. A few other things. We have the talking about cinematography. I think the main notable thing was during the poem sections, you had all the overlapping images, kind of like showing the moments that Paterson saw in his life and why it's inspiring the poem. I remember it was like the when he's making that love poem about the Ohio blue state matches. It had like 3 layers of opacity. It had him writing it. It had the Ohio blue state, so you could see what he's talking about, and then it had Laura as well. And then there's often like the waterfalls. It felt very much like a meditation Zen. It's like you are now drifting off to sleep, kind of like music and visuals to it. Which was silly. I thought at first, the first time it happened, I was like, oh, this is a parody. This is like a parody of poems. But then it was actually about poems. And I was like, okay. Oops. But, what was I talking about? Yeah, that Ohio Blue State one was good too. Because he was talking about, he was talking about the shape of the text on the matchbox. And then you could see it as well. And then, I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. But, hey. It worked well. The cinematography was very fluid. That's the word I'll use. A lot of like when he's driving the bus, you have the camera like just moving along the streets, seeing what he's seeing. Oh, one thing I wanted to say was like, I think movies have conditioned me to whenever there is a driving scene, I think something's bad's going to happen. Because in the movie, you have driving scenes. And there was one where it's like he's listening to the people in the back. And then they finish talking or they leave the bus and then he keeps driving and like nothing happens for a bit. And I'm like, oh gosh, it's like the calm before the storm. You have him not doing anything on the bus for a second. I was like, oh gosh, something bad's going to happen. And I feel like I was just on edge every time he was driving because movies have conditioned me to fear the worst when driving scenes happen. What else do I want to talk about? Let's see. Oh yeah. The twins motif. So, very beginning, Laura says that she had a dream that they had twins. Hereditary driving scene. Yes, exactly what I think of, honestly. I remember seeing the Hereditary driving scene and like, I don't get too scared at scary movies, but I'm like, the movie was so real up until that point. I know it gets a little crazy at the end of it, but like it was very real up until that point. And the way they just lingered on Alex Wolff in the car after that happened was like, dude, that was scary. But yes, what was I talking about? Right. So, Laura had a dream at the beginning of the movie that they had twins, and then throughout the movie, there's just random twins everywhere. And I don't know what it means, but like, maybe it's like he remembered that conversation and that's the movie's way of reminding us that he's still thinking about that, maybe. It's a very subtle movie that I feel like if you actually look at everything and unpack all the different themes, you can find cool connections. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's just like, another thought I had was like, it's about movie about poetry. It could just be like about rhyming, you know? Rhyming is always like what's the word I'm looking for? Duplicating sounds. That's literally what rhyming is. Maybe it's like visual rhyming. I don't know. Maybe it's like on this. Okay, so twins are like, on the surface, they look like the same person. But then they're actually different people inside. Because of course they're not the exact same. And so maybe that's talking about how Adam Driver's character, Paterson, he is a poet and a bus driver. And maybe he like sees himself as 2 different things, but really he's one thing. I don't know. Does that mean anything? I don't know. But yeah, the twins thing was weird and it had me scratching my head. But I like those kind of like silly motifs throughout it. Let's see, what else do I have to talk about? Oh yeah, at the beginning of the movie, they had a very quick thing on his bedside table. He was in the army, which I believe Adam Driver was actually in the army as well. And I thought that maybe it was going to be like about his trauma in the army. I feel like many people probably thought that as well. It definitely was not. Or maybe it subtextually was. The only time when they really like very much called back to it was when he disarmed Everett at the bar, very professionally. If we're thinking about the narrative of a subtle plot where he's like maybe not PTSD, but like the war has made him so used to, or not used to, but it made him appreciate the smaller things in life. He went off to war, saw crazy things, comes back to his normal life, and now he's like, I guess normal life is pretty cool. And then he writes poetry about it. That makes sense. That's a small connection that could be made. But yeah. What else do I have to talk about? I feel like there was something else I wanted to mention. In an interview, I talked about it at this very beginning, about Jim Jarmusch. He creates art for oneself before others. And in the movie, Adam Driver's character, Paterson, doesn't want to share his poetry. You have Laura convincing him, making him promise, almost manipulatively, to make a copy of his poem book. And almost poetically, it gets destroyed by the dog. Now I'm trying to think in my head, if maybe that's like representative of him destroying his own work. If the dog represents him, I don't know. I feel like the talk of like him representing the dog or things like that, it's like, I don't know if that has any merit to it. But in the end, I think that I feel like a lot of me talking about this movie today was me being like, oh, this could mean this. But in the end, it doesn't give you many answers. And that's nice, because I think the main thing that I'm very confident about is like, it's a movie about appreciating the small things. And you see him do that, see something, write a poem about it. And in this movie, things happen and they maybe not be connected. They set things up and they never come back to them. They set up dog napping as a threat. Doesn't happen. And maybe it sets up your expectations to be like, oh, there's going to be a plot about him suffering from PTSD in the army. Maybe he's going to have a conflict with his wife. But no, nothing happens. And it relates to real life because the small moments, as are in this movie, that you remember. Like, I remember small moments like the dog pushing over the mailbox. I remember her getting out of bed specifically to kiss him. I remember, the guy rapping at the laundromat. And sometimes it's like you don't know why they mean anything, but hey, in the end, if you think something is meaningful, it probably is. Doesn't need to be a reason why. This was a very vague Cineclub, and that makes sense because this movie was very vague. But alas, I think I'm nearing the end talking about Paterson because I feel like I'm just talking out of my ass. But I really, really did like this film. I gave it a 9 out of 10. A 4.5 stars on Letterboxd. But again, I always say Letterboxd reviews, number rankings don't mean anything. They're just there because people like making lists and ranking things, as I do, but talking about it is more fun. But in the end, I liked Paterson because it was very calming. It felt like a very sobering, a very chill movie. And before watching it, everyone's like, it's just a normal life. A guy going through his normal life. I was like, okay, is it really? And it really was. It really was. As advertised. And it was great. I really love Paterson, and I recommend it to everybody, honestly. One of my favorite Cineclubs, movies that I have seen. But hey, if you've seen Paterson, let me know what you thought. Next week, I have to choose a film. I think that I had a few written down. I wanted to do Mandy with Nicolas Cage in it. Here, let me bring up a graphic here. Mandy, IMDb. I wanted to do the film Mandy. It seemed wild. It seemed fun. But it's not on any streaming service. And if other people are going to watch it, I would like it to be more accessible. But man, it looks like an all-time classic Nicolas Cage performance that I don't want to miss. And I will watch it one day. But I want to... Mandy was one choice. I was thinking I could go a Mimi route. Oh, this is a tough decision. Okay, if anybody is in the chat right now, I have a... How many options will I choose? 1, 2, 3. Okay. This one's a little longer. Jackie Brown, Quentin Tarantino movie. It's 2 hours and 34 minutes, but it's, I think, one of the only Quentin Tarantino movies I have not seen. And hey, Quentin Tarantino movies are always a good time. Don't know much about it, and I don't want to before watching it. That's an option. Option 1. Option 2 is a Mimi one. I don't think I've really done a Mimi Cine Club yet, but Face Off, if we wanted to stick with the Nicolas Cage theme. I've never seen Face Off, and I would love to one day. And that day could be next week, who knows. Option 2. 2 hours, 18 minutes. That's pretty long, too. And option 3 was from 2019, The Sound of Metal, which was nominated for Best Picture, and I never saw it. Riz Ahmed. I had the chance to see it at TIFF in 2018, and I didn't. I was in a rush line to watch something, and I could have gone to this instead, but I didn't. A heavy metal drummer's life is thrown into freefall when he begins to lose his sense of hearing. And I've heard it's really good. So what was that? What'd I say? Jackie Brown, Face Off, Sound of Metal. What shall I choose? Oh, that's my... I had some Paterson reviews open I was reading. I think I am going to choose The Sound of Metal. Yeah, I'll choose The Sound of Metal. So, next week, what is next week? 27th? 28th. Next week, March 28th, we're doing Sound of Metal.